computer.
Bill, if
Great.
I could just
So
ask a quick question of Don or David. Dave, did you work on the Tomorrowland Space Mountain in Florida at all?
I worked at both of them.
Okay, because there's a 50th anniversary coming up at Walt Disney World, and they're putting together a presentation, and they're looking for people who worked on that project. So I will pass your name on. If you could leave your contact information, maybe in the chat or something, however you feel comfortable with it.
It's David.English spelled Inglish at macmac.com.
Okay. I will let that person know. I'll get to you too and let you know a little more about it.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
great, thanks.
Also.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate folks joining. We have somebody who's new to these chats. I think he might have been here earlier, Michael Crawford. He was on the chat yesterday. And welcome, Michael. We'd like to just say hi. Any way of words of introduction to the rest of our merry band?
I'm excited to be back. It's been a while since I've been able to make one live, and I loved your talk last night. I'm a writer for Imagineering down here in Orlando, and just trying to keep the tradition rolling, I suppose.
Oh, appreciate it. You and I worked together on project. It seems like decades ago. It's amazing
Yes.
how long. Like I just got a memory today that we were at Disneyland a year ago, and had a really great day. And you go, that seems like 5 years ago. And then other thing is, was that 10 years ago? But yeah, time has a way of compressing, doesn't it?
10 years ago, and that was right when I moved down to Florida. So you mentioned that event last night, and I just thought, my gosh, how has it been 10 years? But it
I
was a
know.
fun time.
It's insane. Yesterday, when I was at the station, I was checking my gear out. We have this room we go to called the kit room, and everybody gets all the stuff, the shotguns for the cars and all that. And I'm looking at some of the young officers, and you can tell the guys are just out of the academy because they wear a slightly different shirt. And looking at them, going, my God, I have socks that are older than these guys. I mean, oh God. So yeah, crazy day yesterday. So we'll and talk about that some other time. But what I'm going to be talking about today is the 1933-1934 Chicago World's Fair. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago when we restarted the talks after the summer break, I have a huge amount of pictures of things that are in the restoration pipeline, which at the current rate, I have to live to be at least 235 to ever get to that. And that's before the stuff that gets delivered today. So we're going to see some pictures that are, duck spots here, scratches. That's the sort of thing I would normally take out. But also, you're going to see, a lot of repetition because just like if you go to the 64 World's Fair, everybody took a picture of the Unisphere. Well, when you went to the 1933 World's Fair, everybody took a picture of the Avenue of Flags, that sort of thing. So some of the pictures have basically they're a folder. As I scan them, they go in a folder, they go in the next folder, the next batch. Some of them are restored because I use some of them in the book. Others are just sitting there waiting to be done. So I will come up, share the screen. Come on, share screen. There we go. And I am going to, here we go. And we don't have any video today, so I don't have to worry about optimizing. So let me share. So again, these have been rough scans, and they, what you call it? Some of them are prints, some of them are negatives, and it's a real mixture. Like this batch here was a bunch of really nice large size negatives, so you're able to get a lot of details out of them. So here we're looking at the fair. The first thing I looked at this when I noticed it with the lights on either side. We talk at the 64 World's Fair about the luminaires, but it seems like at almost every fair people come up with a different design for the street lights. And sometimes the entire fair has the same design. Other times they design for particular areas for themes and that. So and again, what I really get a kick, and I'll show on some examples on some of these, the amount of detail you can pull out of a negative. And in some cases, we have details of prints that are really just kind of astonishing, which you can pull out of a print the size of a baseball card. So again, this is looking back at one of the entrances into the fair, and then we're looking down the avenue of flags here. The flags were all just giant colored banners. They had talked about putting in the flags of the states, but not every state participated. So did you have flags of 21 states instead of all 48 at that time? So they decided to go with colored banners. They also decided to go with colored banners because they found out really quickly that these got ripped to shreds by the winds that come off the lake. And that way, they didn't have to worry about, well, the New York flag got ripped, but the New Jersey didn't. How many New York flags do we need? If they were all just colored banners, you just replaced any one of them with another generic colored flag. And then you did have the U.S. flag. They had a fountain here, and again, you can lay out the land. We're just continuing to walk further and further into the fair. In the back is one of the towers of the Sky Ride, and we'll see more of that. And you can see some of the cars going across it in the background. Now, this is often negative, and it's interesting because the negatives used silver nitrate for part of the process, and in that sometimes if they were not properly processed in 1934 for this particular one, the silver would continue to oxidize, just like you believe a silver spoon sitting in a drawer and you take it out, a couple of years later, it's got stuff all over it. So that's one of the issues you end up with some of these things like you see in the center, some parts of it have continued to go. And what's nice is, again, with the computer, you can fix some of these things by pulling, the magic tools, doing it and brushing it out. You end up with all sorts of other damage and spots from, processing, and a lot of it can be fixed. You can date this to 1934. Oh, that's the interesting thing with negatives. It's often, when was this taken? With a print, you can often have the thing with this little date on it, October 1961, or your mother might have written on the back, Uncle Fred, 4th of July. But with negatives, there's usually no date on them. And you show up with a bunch of negatives and you try to figure out, okay, I have a rough idea. It's the 33, 34 fair. But you can look at this one and say, oh, this one's 1934. And I know you're all sitting there in awe. How does Bill know that? Well, it's because this fountain was added out in the middle of the lagoon for 1934. So, and again, here's just another display of it. This was originally where they had planned to put the giant theme structure showed in a prior talk. Was going to be a huge mountain out in the middle of the lake with water pouring down. And they realized they had no money to build it, so they never built it. But they didn't make enough money in 33 that they were able to come and put a water treatment out there in 34. And we have the state of Illinois, the host state for the pavilion. Inside was a typical thing you get any state pavilion about the wonders of the state. You got to, of course, have pictures of the governor and all the senators and every sort of thing. But they had a big thing in here on 2 displays, one on tourism and one on commercial possibilities. And in there, they invited people from Illinois businesses that if you wanted to host people to come to the fair, you could get free admission for your guests to come in and sit down and chat business in a very nice dining room facility that they operated in there. And just another different view of these, the same facility. He mentioned the Sky Ride. This was a very last minute addition to the fair, and it turned out to be the unofficial theme structure. As I mentioned in the talk I did yesterday, almost every fair has some theme structure to set it apart. So Paris had the Eiffel Tower. We had a giant Ferris wheel for St. Louis. Of course, we know the Trilon in Paris here for the 39 World's Fair, etc. But in this particular one, when the plans fell through for the big tower they were going to put out in the middle of the lake, luckily a private guy stepped up as their salvation. Just like the Space Needle at the 1962 World's Fair was built by private interests and not built by the World's Fair Corporation. This guy had an idea for the Sky Ride, and these towers are immense, and you can see the size of the cars going across. We're going to see a close-up of them as we go through this, and we'll give you an idea of just how big they were. but they were stylized after flashboard and rockets with rocket jets on one side, and they would go back and forth. And the whole thing was done up here at this level, but the towers went up this high because they needed to put support wires that could hold up the lower wires, because they didn't want any support tower in between. And there was no way that they could get cables that were strong enough to go from this tower to the other tower without some additional support. In the background, we have the United States Pavilion. We're going to see a lot of details of that. Another view of the tower, and some more of the cars going out. And again, little details. Now we have different luminaries here. They're very low lights. The whole theme of this area, Japan in the background, is changed. So we're going to go with a nicer motif. This was the Hall of Science. This was how when the World's Fair Corporation decided that they weren't going to build the big tower out in the lake, they started promoting this as the theme of the fair. And it's actually interesting because down here you have the Hall of Science sign, and we're going to see more of that. They put all these chairs down here for concerts, exhibits, and that. And this whole Hall of Science here was where you had tons of exhibits. And they had this big tower, right, which had absolutely nothing. It was just put there as a eye-grabbing feature, hoping that this would take the place of the missing tower in the lake. So big tall tower, but it never really grabbed onto anybody in terms of merchandising type possibilities. And 1833, 1933, this was again known as the Century of Progress Exposition, because the fair the city rather had been founded in 1833. They had done the big expo, the World Columbian Exposition, and this was 25 years later, so that they had realized the first one made money. Why don't we do another one? So this became the Century of Progress, 100 years of Chicago. Lots of villages. One of the things that was really big about the 33 World's Fair was that they did villages. You had a Swiss village, you had a German village, an American village, and again, this dates this back to the 34 season. There had been the Belgian village in the 33 season was a huge, huge hit. So in 1934, when the fair came back, all sorts of people decided to build their own village. Each of these had a small admission fee to pay for it. So for the folks that weren't familiar with it, it was originally supposed to be the Century of Progress exhibition, the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. It was never planned for a 1934 season. Well, the 1933 season did something really miraculous in the world of World's Fairs. It turned a profit. And it turned a pretty nice profit, as a matter of fact. They really did a good job on it. And it closed, and it was announced that we're done, we're closed, we're going to tear it all down. And some pencil pusher someplace said, this might not be a bad idea to bring this thing back for another year. We've already built the man-made landfill that this thing is built on. We've already buried all the power lines in the ground. We've already, got the roads paved, and we've even got the uniforms for everybody that works there. So why don't we bring it back? And about 80% of the 33 participants said, yeah, we'll come back. We made money. Why not make money again? And the ones that didn't come back, there were some exhibits you look at and you go, why did they ever think they could make money on that one? They tore those down. They built these other villages. And it was really neat because the Irish village and Merry England, some of them are really, really neat and authentic, as we'll get into it.
Isn't that against the rules of the IB to have the fair run for 2 years?
Yeah, but what are they going to do to you if you? And that's a good question. Or the BIE says you can only go for 6 months, right? And but that became an interesting thing because the Chicago did this, and the BIE sanctioned the 33 World's Fair, and then they said we're coming back for 34. What's the BIE going to do? So when they got to the 1939 New York World's Fair, they had really. They signed contracts. So if you see all the merchandise of the 1939 New York World's Fair, not 1939-1940, but in the contracts they had made provisions that if the fair were to return for another season, will you commit, sort of thing. And the same thing with San Francisco, was going to be a 39 World's Fair. So they came back and, well, we're built, in this case, we're going to do the 34 season. What are you going to do for us? The 34 season actually turned a profit, and not as large as the 33 season. And they talked very serious talk about, do we come back in 1935? And they sat back, and finally the organizer said, let's not push our luck. If the rate of people goes down at the rate it went between 33 and 34, 35, we might break even, we might lose money. Let's not bother. Plus, these pavilions were all built to last for 6 months. And now they're dealing with the Chicago winters, and some of them after 2 years definitely would have needed some R&R, tender rebuilding. But that again, you look at what Montreal did. They operated there 6 months, and they went the next 10 years with man in his world. So, but Admiral Byrd was a guy that gone off to the pole, and it's hard to believe. They were still sailing. Three masted sailing ships and taking them out, and you could come on board, and he had his crew of sailors that actually gone with him to the pole. And the newspaper reports, some of them say how they were a rather crusty bunch, and that they were very glad to have all the women come on board, and they were saying that sometimes the crew had to be calmed down by the security folks. This was an interesting one. There's a plane going by at high speed. He's caught him with a bit of a blur, but if you look at the sign, it was a demonstration of U.S. airmail. And in this particular one, trains for years had been coming into stations and picking up the mail without stopping. And they had a whole mechanism where they could drop you a mail bag, and drop in the mail bag's pretty easy. Just chuck it off the train, right? Except if there's anything breakable, not so good. But they had to come up with a mechanism where they could hang a mailbag on a hook outside the train. As they went through the station, it would transfer from the train onto a hook on the platform, and they would pick up another bag on another hook and take that on the train. Well, this enterprising fellow here decided, why can't planes do that? That I could fly down over a lake. I never have to stop. I could pick up the mail from a floating buoy out on the lake. And I can pick up the mail from, say, I don't know, the town I lived in, Baldwin, New York. We didn't have any lakes, but we had a harbor. I could pick up the mail, drop off the mail, and I could get it there really fast. So he did this as a demonstration out here at the fair, and it was successful. And he got a contract from the U.S. Postal Service, or Post Office, whatever they were called at that point in time. And it lasted for about 3-4 years, and picking up mail at remote places and dropping it off. So you see people in the launch out here, and they're getting a good demonstration. And again, if you zoom in on these things, it's kind of interesting. You can see lots of details. There's lots of grain in this particular picture because of the type of negative that was used. But you can see that we're gonna, he's telling you use U.S. airmail, and we're gonna do a demonstration every day at 12, 2, and 4 p.m. So this was kind of neat. This is the Havoline motor oil thermometer, and telling you how hot it is at the fair. It was not a real thermometer. It was not full of mercury. It did not use electric lights or anything like that. It used a cloth panel that somebody would go on a rope and a chain and pull it up to the right temperature or lower it back down. Down below, you see a sign for the hub, Henry C. Litton and Sons. And that was a very popular department store in the Chicago area. They had a number of outlets. And if you came to this particular one, they sold clothing. So if you came out to the fair and you wanted to buy, they didn't sell too much in the way of t-shirts or anything back then. But you could buy clothing out there, get yourself a new hat or a scarf if it was chilly out. And down at the bottom, this semicircular structure with this pole here, this was one of the official information booths of the fair. So kind of fun to see that out there. Mentioned the Belgian Village. This is really how I got into the 33 World's Fair. It was on eBay, and somebody was advertising a bunch of negatives from the Belgian Village from the 64 World's Fair. I bought them, got them, and I said, what the hell? Everybody's wearing these really old clothes. And it turned out that in doing research, the 64 World's Fair was a carbon copy of the 33 World's Fair. whoever the gentleman was that decided he was going to build the Belgian village had actually gone over to Belgium, made plaster molds of actual buildings over there, came back and used it to build this particular village. Those molds, you wonder where they sat for all those years, because after the 33 World's Fair, they sat in storage, and they were pulled back out to do a partial Belgian village at Expo 58 in Brussels, which is kind of interesting because now you think it would have been easier if you're already in Brussels and you're copying a Belgian village to just do it over there. Well, rather than to go to the expense of making new molds, you have the molds from Chicago shipped over. And then somebody saved those, and they said, well, let's use those in 1964. So I'm just trying to figure out in some warehouse someplace, is there a warehouse full of molds that when we do the 2034 World Fair or something, we can redo the Belgian village. This is interesting. It's the entrance to the Belgian village. He looks more like a Swiss guard to me. But what's interesting again with the and again, this is not a restored picture. Yesterday, Carol told me I keep saying the word interesting a lot. I guess I do find things interesting. But in this particular case, if we zoom in on it, you can see the Belgian village and the price of admission for adults and children, and the program is all the wonderful things we're going to have. And we have public dancing every night and all sorts of things going on inside. Just great details you can pull out of these things. And inside, you look at this, and boy, if I colorize this, you would think you were at the 64 World's Fair. The point where the 64 World's Fair built on absolutely flat ground, because it was built on the site of the 39 Fair, which was built on top of a garbage dump. But now to build the village here, and the Chicago village had this hill in it because the town that they copied had a hill in it. So New York had to go and build up their plans, their sites, so it matched the original plans. And just some additional views here of it. There were some small minor changes between 33 and 64, but for the most part, they really mapped. We're going to see this guy in a little later on, but to show you how authentic it was, he was a milk delivery dog, and those metal things in the can there, in the wagon. In Belgium, this dog would go around, and apparently he was so well trained, he didn't need somebody to take him with him. He would go to your shop and stop outside, and you would come out and you would take your container of milk, put your money in a little container, and then the dog would trot off to the next place. And hopefully at the end of the day, he got a really nice dog biscuit or something out of it. But they had him at the fair, and luckily he just sat by his wagon. I don't think they made him carry it around. One of the big things they did in Chicago at all these villages was dance groups. They invited local people that had moved there from that particular country to come in and perform. So it was very popular that you had Irish dancers, you had Belgian dancers, you had French dancers, that sort of thing. And again, this is a great way to increase attendance. It gives the guests something to look at, but if your mom's going to be dancing out at the World's Fair, you know you're going to go into the World's Fair and buying a ticket. And her brother's probably going to go to the World's Fair, and the people next door are going to go to the World's Fair. So keep inviting people from different national groups to come in, and you increase your attendance. Now, when they built the fair, they thought they were going to get 60 million people to come the first year. And I think they got about a third of that. But they had kept their expenses down. I mean, if they had had 60 million people, they would have made a hell of a profit. But this is a day at the 34 season. And again, it's not dated. My guess, and it's purely a guess, is that it's near the end of the fair. Looking at the clothing that people are wearing, it looks a bit on the chillier side. Looking at the leaves in the trees, and I'm also suspecting that people are, coming in to see it before it's all gone. Just like every other World's Fair fills up the last week, month, as everybody's realizing it's going to be coming. But that's quite a crowd of people out there on the street. Another view. Again, this is when I got the original batch of negatives, and everybody's wearing all these type of clothes. I realized unless it was the equivalent of Dapper Day, which they do at the parks, and everybody dresses up in older clothes. That
notice that woman in the woman in the front row was on her cell phone. Do you notice that? She's a time traveler.
Yeah, she's saying, I've got a hell of an earache. No, yeah, it does look like it. with some of these things, you never know. Is there a band playing right here? Is she just keeping her hair from blowing? Who knows? And then some of these pictures, you get some of them are fairly nice in terms of detail. And when I, again, adjust this for brightness and do some sharpening and stuff, others, people are moving, everybody's going around so that they're in the to be done pile and see if they get done someday. This is a nice one. This is the Heidelberg Inn here, and they had German food. And if you start zooming in on some of this, we move over here, and you can see, I can see it more on my monitor. I don't know how much compression gets done here, but there's a show here about something, the weasel. And I'm not sure what on earth the weasel was. I'm going to go look in the newspaper, but they were doing some sort of play about something, the weasel. And again, it's just kind of fun to pull these things out. This gives you an idea of how one looks when I do some restoration on it, because I did use this in the book. Sally Rand was very famous for doing her fan dance, getting all the men to come in, and she'd wave the fans back and forth as different pieces of clothing came off. So in the Italian village, she'd been in a different spot in 33, moved out here for 34, and it was a big popular show. Again, we zoom in on it, you can see here, peasant art from Czechoslovakia. No idea if this was something they were selling, showing, or whatever, but you can pull out all sorts of fun little bits and everything on these. Another one of the villages. It'd be fun when I restore these all back, but these guys look like they're having a tug of war or something up here. And old Mexico, you can walk through. And look at all the details that they did on these. Again, these are buildings that are, when they're built now for the 34 season, again, for, even when they did the 33, they thought they were going to do 6 months, but a lot of brickwork and everything. So an awful lot of work went into these things for, people coming and doing the wrought iron, the brickwork and everything. And that's what, to me, makes the World's Fair so special, is that you better go see it now, because it's all going to be gone in a very short period of time. This gives you a good example of how the world was so compressed. On the left side of the street, you could walk into the Spanish village, and the other side, you could walk into the colonial village. Again, build all this for the 34 season because they were in a village craze. This particular area, and I think in 33, had been used for a beach and stuff like that, and people didn't need to pay to go to the beach for other free beaches. But out here, you can see the various street signs of where things are. And if we go over here tonight, we can see that there's no cover charge to come into the show. Can't quite make out. Yes, I see you there, puppy. We can't make out quite make out who the stars were for performing that night. But there was an admission to go into the village. You can see the little ticket booth here. But then once, and that's kind of the interesting thing. There's no cover charge to go into the show, but there was a admission charge to get into the village. And some signs inside, sites inside the village. A recreation of Mount Vernon, George Washington's home. And this did not have a historical museum or anything inside. This was a restaurant. So it looked just like Mount Vernon. I guess if George Washington was having dinner for 200 or something. But then people could sit out here. Hang on, I'm just letting some people into the chat. So they're all sitting out here. This is something you would never, ever, ever do in a World's Fair today. Midget City, it was a big thing at a number of fairs that they brought little people in to basically live at the fair. Some of them actually lived physically on site, others lived nearby and came in for the day. But there was a fascination at that point in time, which it's hard to understand why. I mean, people must have known there were people with dwarfism or other issues, but we'll see more of Midget City going inside. Over here, you can see these figures up here. It's the Irish village that's right behind it. More of the colonial village. Then we hop off over across the street, down the road a little bit. We're in merry old England now. And this is a recreation of the Globe Theater. where they did Shakespearean plays. But rather than have a Shakespearean play that would go on an hour and a half, 2 hours, which people didn't want to sit there and take time out of their World's Fair experience, they came up with 20-minute versions. So, 20-minute version of The Tempest or Romeo and Juliet or whatever. And they turned out to be so popular that they then licensed off their 20-minute versions to little Shakespeare groups around the country. And it became a really big thing that people who had never been to a Shakespeare performance didn't want to necessarily sit through the whole thing. They also kind of modernized the language a little bit, but it became a big thing. And Eleanor Roosevelt came out and gave a speech from their version of the Globe Theater. This was something that was really interesting. This was Fort Dearborn, a wooden stockade, really faithfully recreating an actual fort that had been there in Chicago. This blockhouse here, if you collect stamps, was one of the official stamps of the, there were 2 of them released for the 33 World's Fair. And this blockhouse was on the stamp. When they decided to tear down the fair after the 1934 season, they said, hey, this Fort Dearborn, this is really historical, place in Chicago history. Why don't we leave it up? So they left up Fort Dearborn, and that was there a couple of years after, and then unfortunately it burned down in a fire and was lost. But this was, so you had the 33, 34 World's Fair, and then you had Fort Dearborn 1 or 2 years after that. And again, just another one of the villages as we walk through. This was a copy of what was called the LaSalle Cabin. There was a explorer that came by, a French Canadian or French explorer came into the area, set up the cabin on the side of the lake, and started trading furs and that with the Indians. And they did a faithful recreation of his spot. Another village, the Black Forest. We're going to go off to Germany. We're going to see more of that. And one of the things they marveled about was how they put fake snow on all the roofs to make it look like you were, in a real forest, and they hung fake icicles on them. So, but they did have, we'll see coming up, they did have a refrigerated ice skating rink. But I don't know, do they still make Solingen, the world's best cutlery? And I don't think we have any of that at home. But these are on side the Black Forest. And they had, as I mentioned, a refrigerated ice skating rink in here, and people come and give performances. Had a really nice restaurant, according to the newspapers of the time, which, by the way, if nobody has newspapers.com, it's just a wonderful way to go back and look at an event like this, not just see a photo, but you read the newspapers of what people thought about it. And again, you get the reviews and people talking about the restaurants and how you can see the show outside. And they had all sorts of things. A guy out here in a top hat and tails doing his routine. He's going to do some sort of backflip or whatever. In some pictures, I don't know if I have them today or not, they said barrels up on it, and they would do barrel jumps in front of the people. So here's all the crowd watching. A bunch of the gals all out there in their outfits and doing their skating routine. Oh, yeah, here's some of the barrels, so that they're going to go out and jump over them and have a great time. Again, this dates it to 1934 because Ford had not participated in the 1933 World's Fair. Henry Ford was supposed to be a real no-nonsense businessman, and why would I want to be out there for that? Well, when GM came out and Chrysler came out and participated at the 33 season and their sales went up, Ford came back with not 1, not 2, but 3 exhibits for the 1934 season. This building here was known as the Ford Wonder Rotunda, and it had all sorts of displays inside of how Ford cars are made, some examples of older cars, some predictions for newer cars. It was very well received. After the fair, the building was taken down. It was moved back to Dearborn, Michigan, and operated for years as the Wonder Rotunda with the latest and greatest Ford cars in it. Unfortunately, I forget the exact year. There were some workers up on the roof putting a new roof on the top of it, and their torch fell over, set the hot tar on fire, and burned the building to the ground. This was one of their other exhibits. They had a Ford Symphony Gardens. They had orchestras in here. And again, I mentioned sometimes these pictures have strange things happen to them. No clue what made these 4 dots appear on it. But when I get to restore it, the 4 dots happily will go away. Mayan temple, exact copy of a Mayan temple, actual ruins out in the jungle, except with one small detail. They started building it and realized it would cost them an absolute fortune to build the entire thing. So they built about 20% of it, and it was still absolutely huge for what they built. If you look at color pictures of this, it was really ornate, all the tile work and everything they had done on it. Absolute gigantic pavilion. Mentioned the other guys had been out there. They had done all sorts of exhibits, made lots of money. So Henry Ford came back out. So here you have the General Motors Pavilion with all their names on there. You know, Body by Fisher, Pontiac, you know, Oldsmobile names that are gone today, Buick. I guess, is it Frigidaire even still around? I don't think so. Chrysler was really an interesting one because they had a two-level pavilion here with these glass windows. During the day, you didn't see an awful lot, but at night, when they were lit up, you could see all the new Chryslers all laid out. And inside, they had a simulated assembly line showing how they put them together. Standard Oil did a great thing, a lion show where they came in and you can see they're all lined up here. And this was free. You didn't have to pay admission to this particular one, but you could come out there and get your free circus act. This was the transportation pavilion, and this was a really groundbreaking piece of architecture for its point in time. These pillars around the outside are holding the roof up with these wires, which meant there was no pillars needed inside this building to hold the roof up. So you could go and put very large displays inside and not have to worry about working your way around pillars. And this was one of the first big examples he had done of cantilevered ceiling construction. Some people had done some smaller ones to you know, kind of test it, break ground on it. But this was a huge engineering success. And a lot of the engineering papers of the time just absolutely marveled. Because again, you have to build this thing to hold up the snow and everything that you're going to get on it. So a very interesting way that they did it. They brought in trains from around the world. Sometimes they came over here through Canada and you know, came down that way, but others had to be put on ships and brought over from you know, Europe, that sort of thing. In the background, there's an interesting tower here. You'd have cars on it, and they would go like a giant conveyor belt. They would go up to the top, come down, and everything. And there's actually car dealers now that I think it's Carvana in some of these places, same sort of thing. Rather than have a giant car lot that fills up, you know, because land in Southern California and everything is so expensive, or in other cities, rather than, you know, if you're gonna have 1,000 cars and you got to stretch them out over how many acres or anything, put them on this device. And if somebody says, I want to see car number 27, you push the button, the elevator comes down, there's car number 27. The guy wants to take it for a test drive. You drive it off, you take it around. When it comes back, you put it back in its spot. And it was a very futuristic thing that didn't catch on until a couple of years ago. Somebody, you wonder if they saw this and thought about it, but now they have. There's one down near San Diego that operates with that. So they not only brought in the most modern streamlined trains, but they brought in all sorts of antique trains, and they had a very large show of railroad history out there right on the lake. In some of the cases, they were the authentic engines, and a few of them, they were reconstructed versions. But the General, which we've seen at the 39 World's Fair, the 60 World's Fair, that's an excellent presentation in Kennesaw today. The General was there, again, chugged up here in its own power. So they had, again, all sorts of things. You had the streamlined trains, you had the you know, old coal burners. You had the most modern steam engines here, and you also had diesels coming along. So diesels are just getting invented at this point in time. And there's the car conveyor belt in the background there. Mexican Village, again, all these things had an admission. I don't know if we can see how much. Most of them are about 10 cents, something like that. So I can't quite make it out, but there's always an admission booth, somebody, because they had to pay for these things somehow. And inside you had restaurants, you had dancers, and of course you had souvenir shops. The United States Pavilion, the three towers here representing the three branches of the United States government. In the background, this semicircular arch was where all the individual states had their pavilions. You had a greenhouse that you could go and see all sorts of things being grown. Same, another semi-close view. One thing that was really big was the Greyhound, the Goodyear rather blimp, was based at the fair. Matter of fact, that sometimes they had two of them, and you could go out, pay an admission. They would take you out over the lake and get about a 15-minute ride in the Goodyear blimp, which has been on my bucket list for years to get up in a blimp. And if I get my time machine going, I guess I can go back there. But they were very, very popular, and we have a couple aerial views coming up. Excuse me. Electric power pavilion in the background. Now, one of the things they did was they built docks at some of the pavilions. They had two lagoons, a north and a south lagoon. And the idea was that you could take a boat over here. Well, it turned out the lake got very choppy, and some people didn't like being bounced around in the lake. Money was also not, real easy to get for some people. So rather than paying the quarter or whatever to take the boat ride, I'll just walk across the free bridge. So the guy that had the concession for the boat rides did not do real well. Electric power pavilion. There's two murals on either side of it about how electricity does all these wonderful things for us. This looked really nice at night, lit up. But inside you had all sorts of demonstrations about electricity, how the whole thing, gets from a power dam or a coal burning facility to your house. These people did decide to take one of the boat rides, and it gives us a nice background. In the back, this area here is called Enchanted Island, and it wasn't really an island, but it was there's a giant kid on a giant red wagon here, and this is where the kids area for the fair was. And just more looking across the lagoon, more of the some of the same. Lots of benches. Wayne mentioned a week ago, had I found any more pictures of a mushroom fountain, which we've been trying to identify. It was right near here, but I didn't see any pictures in the group that are going to come up to, today. But they had all sorts of things out here. They did do things out on the lake. They had boat races. We'll see some of that, odds and ends. But for the most part, it was just, way to come and get off your feet, relax, enjoy yourself. The horticultural building had the greenhouse we saw before was a guy on how you would like to buy plants. We can ship them to you. And we also had a garden out back where you could go and see all these things. And there were little tags out there, and you could say, I don't know what this bush is, but send me one of those. And they would send you one to your house via mail order. Again, some of the boat rides going out there. More of the gardens. And some of these things you wonder, is this a real bird, or is this one that they just stuck out there? Real swans. The gardens were really popular. They were a pleasant sort of break from the hustle and bustle of the crowd. But it was also, again, coming out of the Depression, people were starting to enjoy themselves. So maybe I'll put a little spot of greenery in the backyard. And during the Depression, maybe I was growing corn or beets or something. Maybe now I'll put in rhododendrons. Mushroom shaped out there, just a sunshade, and just some more pictures of the garden area. This is one I cleaned up for the book. Guy, how would you like a giant archway in your yard? My yard is not quite so big enough. I mean, maybe some of you can do it. Statues work, and what's interesting is sometimes people, they got focused on this. It's nice and sharp, but they weren't focused on this. So it's just the crapshoot you take with amateur photography. That's the end of that group of negatives. Let me go into the next one here. This next group of them is 1933. Sometimes, again, you get the negatives in an envelope and it says 33 on it. Another is it has a picture of something was torn down for 34. So again, obviously the Belgian village. But if you again look at the pictures of the 64, there's a restaurant, Leopold's, right there at the same one in 64. So people wandering around having a great time. And the Skyway in the background, woman doesn't look particularly happy or smiling, but I'd be happy if I was there. And the Sky Tower, again, some of the stuff that goes wrong with old silver nitrate, we'll take care of that. Here's the same little sunshade or whatever we saw just a moment ago. The Avenue of Flags. And over in the background here, this structure we'll see more of is called Soldier Field. That was a giant arena built before the fair, incorporated into the fair for performances, and it's still in Chicago. If you go out there today, you can still see a Soldier Field. Lots of people with the Belgian village, and they're all walking by. They did make one small change, that we had picturesque Belgium for 33, and it was beautiful Belgium for 64. Great view of one of the Skyway towers. Again, going across the lagoon. And just a general street view. More of the Haveline thermometer. Again, these were great ideas. I mentioned this like at some fairs, put in a tower, because you tell people you get lost, meet me at the tower. Well, again, if somebody's out here and you're selling shirts and hats and everything, maybe if you're waiting for the rest of your party, you buy a hat or a shirt or something. So if you do a World's Fair, put up a tower and advertise it to people as a meeting point, and they will come out. This batch was not only listed as 1933, but we're in June of 1933, according to the envelope these came in. And they had an Indian village out there, and they performed at the fair, but they also lived at the fair. I think there's pictures coming up of the teepees that they lived in. Again, the sort of thing where today would not be politically correct, but at that point in time, you could come out, the Indians would live out there, you could pose with them. They did some trick riding shows, things like that. We'll see more of them coming up. This is the state area. And it was interesting that each state had, you see all these facades are basically the same size. Well, they could go into a building in the background that could go back maybe 30 feet or 50 feet or widen out depending on your state's budget. One of the initial concepts for Epcot was the same sort of thing, that we had these big circular, I'm sure that Dave and Brock will remember it. There were circular pavilions, and they all had the same facade, and then people could build as much behind it as they wanted to. And so some ideas that was obviously not the Epcot we finally ended up building, but it's interesting to see how ideas get recycled. They built all these immense bleachers out on the lagoon here to watch all the shows, and realized that if you were out here and sitting in the bleachers and the boats were out here, they were itty bitty little things, and people just didn't come. So the bleachers, I have, I'd say 20, 30, 40 pictures of empty bleachers and maybe 2 with people in them. Admiral Byrd's South Pole ship, again, was a real big thing. You could come on board. The inevitable ticket booth, and over here, souvenir stand that you could get stuff. And this is Sinclair Dino Land, really, really popular. Sinclair, of course, had the Dino Land at the 64 fair. These dinosaurs were much rougher. You can see how, in the 64 fair, they had, nice smooth skins. These were all rougher, and we're going to see more of them coming up. But it's pretty much, the same sort of dinosaurs. You had a Brontosaurus, you had a T-Rex here. He's getting into a fight with a Triceratops. It was a very popular thing. They had loudspeakers. This was free, just like it was in 64. Come on in, wander around, and it was a real popular thing by Sinclair to do it. More of the the Chrysler Motors Pavilion. I mentioned the temple before. You can again get a good idea from the people up here how big this thing was, and it stretched a good distance left to right. Soldier Field, they used all sorts of shows out there, and they got a pretty good crowd, you can see. So you bring in marching bands, and this, again, a great thing of marketing. If your kid's marching in this band, you're going to pay to go to the World's Fair. So invite every single band to come to the fair for free, but their families had to pay. I mean, just a really brilliant thing. Sometimes these pictures are duplicated. The Indians I mentioned, they actually put them out in teepees, living out there in the fair site. And it was really an unfair, no pun intended, situation for these people, because they're living out here. So where do they get their food? Well, they have to buy it at the company store. Where do you get anything? You got to buy it at the company store. So the money they were making for, I think they gave them free rent on the teepees, but the money they were making to be at the fair, they didn't make an awful lot. one of the things they made money back was they were doing like weaving baskets and selling that sort of thing. But again, the sponsor of this pavilion, who had brought them all in, he got a cut of every basket that they sold. So it wasn't the most fair thing. Here's one of the shows that they did. They had the women all lined up here and a bunch of the Indians. Of course, the Indians were all chiefs. They all had to have big ceremonial bonnets because that's what Hollywood led everybody to expect. And they're getting ready to do a horse routine out here for them. More of the gardens and again statue work, that sort of thing. And it's kind of interesting. Again, you look at this and great gardens. Well, 3 years before this thing was built, or maybe 4 years, this wasn't a garden. This wasn't even ground. This was part of the lake. So the whole thing was done by filling in the lake, pounding pilings into the dirt, building these buildings on it. But you see a little deer here. I again, no idea if this was a live deer or a stuffed deer they stuck out there. But 4 years ago, if you were taking this picture, you would have had to have been in a boat in the middle of a lake, and now you're in this beautiful, thing with the water flowing through it. It's just, as Dave was mentioning earlier, it's amazing if you want to do something, and if you have the money to do it, you can do some absolutely amazing stuff. So let's take a lake. We needed more land for the city of Chicago. How do we pay to put that more land in? We'll have a World's Fair that will pay for the land, and when the World's Fair is gone, we can use it for other things. Again, all part of the horticulture area. Another view out on Soldier Field. Must have been a hot day because everybody's using these sunshades out there. Thing that's so different, you look at the hats, straw hats. I don't know when they came out of favor, but they were obviously still a big thing, and it looks like Panama hats and stuff like that. So good sized crowd. From the Skyway, you can really get a great view. I have a picture in the book looking down of how big the field was, and it's a pretty good size arena. And over here we had China, Japan, and the Temple of Jehol, a recreated this temple here was taken apart, put in storage, later reused at the 39 World's Fair. Taken apart again, sent over to Europe, and it was not put together because people were screaming, even back in the 1950s, about cultural appropriation. So the building sits in storage at a university, I think in Belgium. More of the temple, more of the Indian show. In the background here, you can see a whole thing. They had at one part of the fair, they had a giant ski jump area, and another they had a giant roller coaster, and I'm not quite sure which this structure is back here. I believe this is the ski jump from the ramp here. And where they lived out by the side of the lake. Hopefully they gave them some privacy and didn't charge people to go and peek inside the teepees and see what it looked like, but it was kind of a crappy way to make people live. Dairy industries, very big things. Chicago, of course, and the Chicago stockyards were famous over the years. So in this particular one, they were showing not that we're bringing the cows in to slaughter them, but we now have these great humane ways to feed them, milk them, take care of them. And we zoom in a little bit on it. It's just kind of interesting, the various things you have over here. Public telephone, again, you'd never have that today, right? Because we'd all be on a cell phone like that lady we saw in the other picture. But then here at the bottom, bathing beach. And this was Jensen's Beach. And Jensen, whoever he was, didn't think this out real well. He leased a giant piece of property to put a beach out on the lake, put the changing rooms and cabanas in, and turned out that next to nobody wanted to go to the World's Fair to pay to go to Jensen's Beach. So Jensen wasn't back in 34, but that's where a lot of the villages were built on the side of his beach. Just looking out from the lake, from the ground out on the lake. This was part of the big exhibit they had about Lincoln, and this was something that was really popular with Disney for getting into the land of Lincoln for the 64 World's Fair. He had a real fascination with Abraham Lincoln, had actually played Lincoln in a school play, And this exhibit, you would come in, of course, pay your admission, but there were all sorts of buildings that were famous in Lincoln's life. A recreation of his house that he grew up in, a recreation of his law office, a building called the Wigwam, which was a building used by the government at the point in time. So this was, again, something that was supposed to last and did not. The U.S. Pavilion, the three structures of the three branches of government. And that's the end of that particular folder. And we time hop back and forth. We're going to again be in 1934 for this particular batch. Let's have a marching band come down, go down the Avenue of Flags and get their pictures taken. This was done by a set of prints, and you can see somebody had put them in an album using these kind of funky little black things to put them in the album. This picture would have been about 3 by 5 inches. More of the avenue. The transportation pavilion again. Jimmy Durante comes to town, so he's actually riding in a motorcade. He's just coming into the fairgrounds. Here's one of the fair luminaires, and then the Soldier Field in the background. I get a real kick out of the old style police motorcycle here. You always see these in the gangster movies and stuff, right? Nothing like that they use today. But this is where newspaper comes into handy. That this particular one was September 19th, 1934. Because you do a search, when did Jimmy Durante visit the World's Fair? So it comes up, and they had Jimmy Durante Day, and he came out, and he's riding here in the car, came out, met with the fans, did a comedy routine. It's great. It's really interesting to try to figure out, I don't know Jimmy Durante's particular history, but they didn't seem to do a lot of other performer days like that. So I don't know, just like Lucy Day was a kind of one-off thing at the 64 fair. It seemed Jimmy Durante Day was kind of a one-off thing for the 34 fair, but just kind of neat that somebody caught the schnuggle going into the fair. Fountains inside. Fountains outside Chrysler. These push chairs, this guy was one of the push chair attendants. He's taking a break here. You would rent these for $1 an hour, which $1 an hour is pretty good money back in 1934. And they would push you around the fair, and if you were going to, say, the Italy Pavilion, and he would wait for you outside, and the meter kept ticking and ticking and ticking, and they seem to be pretty popular. They also then, I've got some pictures where they were getting into races, and you could see the people sitting in them were having a great fun, laughing and cheering, and the guys are running, and there's a crowd out there. So these two people, like, I'll race you from Italy to the glass house, and the people inside the things are just laughing and having the greatest time, and it was a kind of interesting thing. More just general views around. Oh, Sears was real interesting. Sears, it's amazing now. You go by any mall and the Sears stores are just about gone. I mean, they've all been turned into something else. But Sears was at the top of its thing going in 33. So they built this giant pavilion out here where you could go in, and anything that was in the Sears catalog, you could go in there and order and buy. But they also operated a first aid bureau in there, and a hospitality center, and a whole bunch of other things to encourage people to come in and enjoy the wonderful world of Sears. And they were also saying this was the early version of air conditioning inside. So, how would you like Sears come in? You'd like to buy stuff, and we can probably even air condition your house for you.
When did they start coming up with pavilions that you can ride through, like you saw at the New York Fair?
Sorry, what was that, Irv?
When did they come up with the pavilion, the concept where you ride through in a chair rather than walk through it?
Oh, the chairs, they had been in the earlier ones. I don't recall exactly when the earliest one I saw was, but you could see pictures of them like in Paris and that sort of thing. Basically they were expensive at every fair. So if you were the well-heeled people going to see a World's Fair, rather than push your way through the crowds and have the dirty public touch you, you'd have somebody come through with a chair and take you around, just like in the villages of the town. The hoi polloi, that everybody lived differently. So people would have a nice carriage with the, and if you were really wealthy, you had somebody that rode you around in the carriage. Dave, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think his question, and I wanted to ask the same thing, was when did ride systems
Oh,
become
ride
part?
systems. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Like you saw at the Bell System Pavilion or the General Motors Pavilion.
Really came about in the 39 New York World's Fair. In the 33, 34 World's Fair, you basically sat in shows and everything. But General Motors was one of the big ones to do it. The General Motors show for the 39 World's Fair basically went on a rotating platform. And you went down and you looked at the city of tomorrow, and it would rotate you in a giant platform, a giant circle around it, so you could get all the views of the city. So you could see the north side of the city rotate around. So that was really the first one that I can think of, or where they brought you in an audience and moved you around. Then
I think that was to handle the crowds to get more people through per hour.
yeah, that's part of it. Again, that was why when Disney did the Ford Pavilion, or actually General Motors, they did the Carousel of Progress, because they found out at Disneyland, if it's just a show, some people would take 30 seconds to look at it, other people want 5 minutes, and you jam everything up. You put people in something that moves, they go at your pace. But the 39 was the first time they started moving people, and then 64 was where it really took off. Even in 62, it's Seattle. I can't think of anything in Seattle. They had a simulated ride to the moon, but you walked into a theater, you sat in the chair vibrated a little for the sake of takeoff. But 64 was where it really put it on the map for large scale movements of people.
You don't see any big crowds and long lines in these photos.
Oh, some days you do, but again, like I showed that one picture. I've got some pictures. Sorry, I gotta get this dog off my lap before my legs go numb. We're a little late for that. I've got some pictures like where they show the incubators the kids were in. The crowds are just packed together. Century Grill was a snack bar, sort of like the brass rail for the 64 World's Fair. More of the state of Illinois with Soldier Field behind it. I got a kick out of this. I wonder if he posed for this picture, one of the guards, or if he just stood there all day. But that pose would get tiring after a while. In the background, a bit of sculptures. During the building of the fair, a lot of these buildings are open to the public, and you could come and pay, I think it was 25 cents, and you could wander around the fairgrounds, mostly in the weekends when the construction wasn't underway. But I've got some really neat pictures of people wandering around here as this building is in the background. And there's a big construction fence up, and they're paying their money to go wandering in. They did an awful lot with lights for this particular fair. For people that are into electric lights, there was incandescent lights, mercury vapor lights. Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted 2 slides before you had looked like a tour bus.
Yes.
There. Was that like a tram?
Yeah, it was. This was Greyhound. Greyhound had gotten the contract to do tours of the fair, so they would take you around. They had an exterior route that would take you around on the fair.
Is that General Motors in the background?
Yeah, General Motors. You can see up on the roof, GM up there. But
Wow, cool.
zoom in here, you can see the Greyhound. It's leaping over here, and down below Greyhound. So they built these special trailers and cabs that take people around. During the construction of the fair, they actually operated the buses during the construction phase, both to test them out and to train the drivers, but also now a great thing for for Greyhound, you pay a quarter, get on your bus and take a tour of the fairground being built. So they were pretty large. You can see the number of people on them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Sure. So again, all sorts of different lights and projections and neon lights on some pavilions, halogen lights. I don't know if halogen, I don't know if they had that then, but mercury vapor was a big thing, and they had all sorts of spotlights in that. The general night view. More of the gardens. And again, we can take this back to 34 by Ford.
Where's all the people? Where's all the people? There's no people.
They're over here doing something. Well, we're at Chrysler now, looking out over their fountains with Ford right off in the distance there. Nighttime, fountains at night. More of the village. But doesn't this look like a really old village? I mean, they did a really nice job of aging it. Considering this thing was a year old at this point in time, it certainly looks more than that. Turnstile, you can't get in without your admission. Switzerland's pavilion or their village. We're just hopping around the grounds. Big mural inside one of the buildings. I think this was the Hall of Science. This was the administration building for the fair. It was one of the first ones built. And one of the things they had done on it was to test some of the materials that they used on the building, but also they had the ability to start testing the electrical system and some other parts of the infrastructure. So during the fair, you could come in and it was a small information area inside, but this was basically where the whole fair was run out of. Again, different things. This is kind of interesting if you zoom in on this. United States Mail, the railway post office. We talked earlier about being able to drop mail off and pick mail up from trains, but it was a very big thing at that point in time to have railway post offices where they actually sorted the mail. So as they came through your town, they'd pick up the mail, either stopping to pick it up or grabbing it on the hook that I mentioned. But now where was the mail going to go? It was going to go to your letter might be going to California. The next letter might be going to New York. So it would sort the mail out on these RPOs, railroad post office, and it would actually cancel and stamp it in something collectors go for RPO cancellations. Then when they get to the next part, they would drop off a bag for New York and drop off a bag for California. And they operated the railway post offices, I believe, into the 1950s, maybe even the 1960s. And then finally now, they started doing more and more mail going by air. There wasn't the need to do it. But you could go and take a tour and they would show you how all the mail was sorted and distributed. So good old Union Pacific. Armor Meats down below, they had a cafeteria. You could come in and get the latest hot dogs and other odds and ends. Streets of Paris in 1933 had been a very popular show, and it came back in 1934. And what was popular about it was not the streets of Paris; it was all the naked ladies that were going to be dancing around for you inside. So you wanted to see crowds, of course. If you want to see a crowd, that's a great way to do it. Go out to a show where there's naked women. So
there's not a woman in that shot. There's no women in it.
What's that?
There's no women in that shot.
Well, here's one. She's probably kicking her husband. Yeah. But the Barker out here, and yeah, don't look,
There's a
Henry.
couple.
Just keep marching. The Barker's out here, and you see this lovely lady, and she'll probably take off her robe and be wearing a bathing suit. And for 25 cents, you can go see more. Very, very popular attraction. Now, it was interesting. The night the fair ended, the final night of the 34th season, they had to call the riot squad in because people went absolutely crazy. I guess you figured nothing to lose. I'm drinking like mad. I want to go meet that gal who's been entertaining me. And the streets of Paris were specifically mentioned for the crowd tearing it to pieces in an attempt to take pieces of the pavilion home. Like, amazing what people do, that taking these caricatures or the thing, but they were just ripping this pieces. And then the crowd started throwing tables through windows, and it was this sort of thing. My parents had seen some of it at the end of the 39-40 fair. There was no way they were going to let me go to the last days of the 64-65 fair. But when you read the descriptions of what happened in Chicago, these people went absolutely bonkers and just tore the crap out of the entire fair. So you wanted crowds, okay? You want crowds, I got crowds. Here again, probably near the end of the fair because it's quite crowded, but infant incubators with living babies, and the sort of thing that we mentioned before with midget towns and everything. Why on earth would you have incubators with living babies? Well, incubators were pretty new at this point in time. Stuff you take for granted today. You have your kids born, they put them in a little cart at the hospital with a little heater and everything in it. But they had a lot of infant mortalities at this point in time with kids, particularly premature babies. Mail call.
See,
Guy,
Robert Moses never allowed anything like this.
I can't hear a thing. I'll be with you in a second. Carol's just getting the mail. A fellow had come up with the idea of the incubators and how to popularize these things. And, I'm making incubators, but how do I get hospitals to buy them? I have to show people that they can do, things that actually save lives. So they had this great idea he came up with that he put the incubators at the fair. And if your baby needed to be in an incubator, they could be in there for free. And they provided 24-hour care, doctors and nurses to take care of the babies. And they started showing on what luck they had, not luck, but skill or success they had on the babies that they were putting in there, on how the mortality rate was greatly decreased by babies being in the incubators, particularly the premature ones. So they had a big ad campaign, to doctors. If you got a baby that you're not sure this baby's going to make it, rush it out to the World's Fair, put it in an incubator, and we'll take care of it.
They also had an exhibit like that in the Atlantic City Boardwalk.
Yeah, well, it became quite successful. They they had a great thing. They got great press out of it. They obviously took advantage. They get whatever. Mrs. Mabel Smith of Anytown, USA, would be in the newspaper talking about how her baby be dead if it wasn't for the World's Fair, and people started buying incubators. So it was a good success. But look at that crowd. I mean, if you zoom in on it, that's a lot of people. Again, everybody's so well dressed. Everybody's, I guess back then, a great career would have been a hat salesperson.
Yeah, hats.
But great thing. More public telephones, signs for the entrances, how to get out of here and get to the Chicago L, the train system. Some more.
It's amazing how hats have gone out of favor completely.
Oh yeah. And again, mentioned they brought in some antique trains that were the real ones. I don't know if this was a real one or if this was a recreation, but if we look in the background, you could see that the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was now air conditioned. Wow. So, maybe if you were going to take trains, and it's hard to realize back then that there were actually different railroads that would go between the same cities. So you had the choice of, do I take this train line or that train line? And, these guys, wow, you could go on the air conditioned train. It's clean, it's cool, and you can enter at this end of the platform. The dinosaurs, again, the Tyrannosaurus. I think the one at 64 was a lot scarier looking than this guy, but he's fighting with the Triceratops over here. I mentioned the blimp. So if you get your 25 cents, you go up on the Goodyear blimp. You look down at the fair. Down here is here's the Haviland thermometer. Over here was the display called the Pantheon, thing about wars and mankind. But all this out here again was all previously lake. You've got the end of the lagoon going out here. The tower ride would have been kind of underneath us at this point in time.
Where's the museum there that still exists to this day?
The Chicago, oh yeah,
Is it the aquarium or the science museum?
It's the Hayden Planetarium and or the Adler Planetarium rather,
Yeah,
and then the Museum of Science. That doesn't show in this particular picture, but it's very nearby. Or the Belgian village outside it. And I think we'll have time for one more folder here.
that shot about the air conditioning, I don't know where they really had air conditioning that year. I think it was just air cooled.
Well, no, that they were working on air conditioning. There were different ways of doing it, but Carrier, I think, was the big guy that got it to be successfully scalable.
Could you go back one? That's a great shot of the sky ride. Those must have been really large.
It is. I have a picture. It's in the book, and I don't know if I'll get to it today, but it's very large. It was 2 levels, and like I said, it was done like a Buck Rogers rocket. This was the front of it, and they had simulated in the back. and they held about 40 to 50 people. So you boarded on there, you came across. What's really remarkable is, the Fair Corporation was really nervous about this guy building this thing because it was a real engineering feat for them to do it. And, we all talk about Chicago, the Windy City, what was going to happen if this thing got stuck up there and they had to evacuate it. What were they going to do? And I don't know of any reports that this thing actually ever broke down, got stuck, or had any issues. I don't know what they would have done. I'm sure they had some plan B for it, but it was again, he built this on. He really rolled the dice. I don't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he basically designed it, built it, paid for it with the money that the admissions were, and it was very popular. There's a picture in the book I absolutely love of a guy standing up on one of the towers, and there's a sign up there how you can see 9 states and 2 countries or whatever. But he's standing up there, and he said, written on the back of the picture, he says, "As close to heaven as I will ever get." I mean, he's way up there on the tower. And I
Wow.
just love the description on it. But yeah, it was really popular, and people would, there were talks in some of the papers, again, newspapers.com, that people would get up to the top of the tower and absolutely freeze. I mean, they were holding on to the steel structure, for life, and they decided they could not take the thing. They would just go back down, and you didn't get a refund. If you went up and didn't take the ride, you still had to pay for it. But this was a great ride. And you can see they had these stabilizing beams that went between the sets of the cables. Here's all the upper cables that come down from the upper sky support from the top level. But
Wow.
they were really smart. To have a picture in the book, while the fair was being built, they took one of the cars to downtown Chicago and put it outside one of the office buildings and said, you will soon see this at the upcoming 1933 World's Fair. The guy was also smart. He got a deal with the Amos and Andy radio show, which was very, very popular at the time. And he renamed each of the cars with a character from the Amos and Andy show.
Oh, wow.
So you could get on the Amos car. In the book, I think the one they have downtown was the Brother Crawford car. But they did that, and they actually did a thing with Amos and Andy doing the radio show from the World's Fair to promote the fair and to promote this. But that was a great idea. I mean, just rather than do these things back and forth, stick the name Andy, Kingfisher, all the characters from the show on it. It's amazing. I can remember the names of all those characters. I don't think I've ever heard an episode of the Amos and Andy show. But,
So you keep talking about your book. Did I miss the plug at the beginning?
No. You never saw my 33 World's Fair book?
No.
Oh,
So
bad
I'm
Dave.
ignorant. Bad
Bad
Dave,
Dave.
right?
Yeah, no, yeah, I'll mention it at the end. Thanks for
Oh.
making me think about it.
Perfectly.
Bill,
Perfect. I
just-
want to get one.
Bill, another question on that last picture. Is that the front of the Japan pavilion?
No, this is actually misleading here. Japan is just off to the side, and this is the Johol pavilion. There was a guy named Bendix, who I think was the guy about did elevators and things like that. He was really into Asian culture, so he built this entire replica, the Pavilion of Johol, Jehol, and has all this gilt work and everything. He did it on his own. Paid his own money. I think Japan is just off to the side here. And then he took it apart, put it in the storage, and this is the one that ended up in New York at the 39 fair, and it's still sitting in a warehouse overseas someplace.
Kind of looks
Well, but
abandoned
my
there.
question was, is if this the front of the whatever pavilion it is was it just dirt walkways in this fair and not paving?
Well,
Because that sure looks.
Japan,
It
I
looks
think,
a-
was actually just off to the side here. So this particular one is a fence here, keeping again, you paid admission to go into this guy's pavilion. So here's a fence here.
Right.
In this particular case, Japan is right off to the side. I believe this was China over here. I'm trying to remember the layout. And in this particular area, I don't think anybody paid or sponsored it. So there was just right here, dirt. For the most
Kind of
part,
looks like it's abandoned with weeds along the fence.
yeah, there were, well, I don't know, they're weeds or there's
Well,
some
also
sort of-
looks like a sewer clean out sticking out of the ground there. You can trip
It could
over
be,
it.
yeah. Could be.
Okay, it was-
Again, just like in the 64 fair, if they didn't pay for it, they sodded it over here. Maybe they did at some other point in time, or again, if it's getting late in the fair, maybe everything's died off.
Yeah.
This is an example of how one looks cleaned up for the book, which Wayne is, or Dave's gonna go by. But this was the electrical industry pavilion. And they had a whole big thing here on how electricity brings light in, lights up your home and brings illumination, and you can, read books at night and study and do all these things. And over here, it also brings energy into your industries, and you can take everything and make it electrical powered. So very modern, stylized building. And in the book, I do mention who the artist is and other odds about it. The cars, again, you can see they had a number of them going back and forth. Soldier Field down below. Looking across at the United States Pavilion.
Did they have an observatory at the top of those towers?
No, this was just purely a functional tower to hold up the steel cables that then held up the aerial cable. So
It would have been a great vantage point, though.
well, you could go up to the top and you could look around, but there was it was an observation platform. When you say observatory, it wasn't anything like a
observation platform.
that. But yeah, this is where you can take your ride up to the top and get as close to heaven as you'll ever get. Now, the Hall of Science was a big part of the pavilion. We'll zoom in here a little bit. I've got other closer pictures elsewhere, but this was a big gimmick that they did for the fair, the light of Arcturus. And their whole thing was that a light coming from this star in 1893, when we had our founding of this thing, was coming through the atmosphere and would hit. And there were 4 different observatories that were on this map. And they made a whole big thing about, oh, the light has hit the first observatory, the signal is flashing to the next one, it's going to the next one, going to the next one. Okay, turn on the lights and open the fair. So for the grand opening of the fair, they had stated that it's going to be exactly this light that left Arcturus in 1893 is going to hit here exactly 40 years later to the minute now to open the fair. Well, of course, they just opened the fair at whatever time, and who could prove that the light beam had taken exactly 40 years to get there. But it was a big thing they had. Western Union was sending the news as the beam was bouncing around the world, and it's the light has hit Australia, the light has hit Singapore, it's hit Europe, and now it's here in Chicago. So they left this up as just a great thing of progress on the fact we could detect light from far distant stars. These pavilions, this was, I think, was the Common Interest Group or something like that. They were all multi-tenant pavilions. So each of these pavilions was identical on the outside, and inside, just like the Better Living Center or others at the 64 fair, you could rent 100 square feet or 1,000 square feet of your exhibit space inside, and show your automatic apple peeler or your dog defleer machine or whatever you were hoping to sell.
How many acres was this?
What's that?
How many acres was this fair?
About 13,000, I think, off the top of my head.
13,000. New York was only
like that.
640.
Yeah, it was. Maybe the number 13,000 was something I was reading earlier today, and maybe that's how many electric bulbs they had. I'd have to go back and read the book. It's in there.
Bill, can
Yeah.
you zoom in on that building in the background in the center?
This building?
Yeah, I'm thinking that's the Reuben Donnelly printers or something.
R.R. Donnelly and Sons, the guys that
Yeah.
printed all the phone books, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, good eyes.
Yeah.
And to the right of that, is that the A&P sign that,
Yeah. I was just gonna get to that.
okay.
Yeah. A&P is really great. They had a big sign here, and you get 8 o'clock there, Red Circle Coffee. But I got a real kick out of this one, because if you're a fan of the 64 World's Fair, you knew how A&P absolutely pissed off Robert Moses by putting up a big sign that he didn't like the fact they didn't have an A&P pavilion at the fair, but they had a big sign, and he tried court orders making them turn off the lights at night. And they finally did come to the thing they would turn it off during the fireworks show. but he wanted them to tear down the sign. He tried to put up balloons to block it and everything. So I got a real kick of what's in the background of this particular one was the A&P thing. Now, in this particular case, they not only had the sign in their factory outside the fair, but A&P did have a pavilion inside the fair where they did stage shows of musicians and entertainers and that sort of thing. But yeah, you look at this and you think, man, you know, in 25, 50 years, what is there going to be? A&P is just going to be pissing off Robert Moses.
Bill, could you go back about 3 photos? One more. Yeah, that one. Just go forward one.
This one or this
No,
one?
the one before. Yeah, that one. I think those panels are, or replicas are in New York City somewhere. They
Really?
look very familiar.
Says energy.
Hey, puppy.
Yeah.
Puppy. Yeah, that's interesting. I have to look into that and see if they do survive somewhere.
What
It looks,
pavilion was
it
that?
looks vaguely familiar. My wife may know.
What pavilion was that?
Electrical power.
That's why it says energy on the panel. Oh.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks. These figures here are aluminum statues, and they're representing there's a man and woman, the people of the future. Again, I'd have to read my own book to remember the details, but they are in it. They have survived, and they're on display at a university today. He was Plaster Paris. I don't believe he survived. And just nighttime view again. They did all sorts of neat things with murals and the lights, and kind of interesting how they put it all together. Here's the Hall of Science, neon lights on each of those facades going across. General Motors came out real nice at night. Look at all those cars inside. Think how neat it'd be to go driving down the road in one of those today.
Look how common these fairs were back then. Every couple of years there was a fair in the United States. Not anymore.
Yeah. Nope, not today. It's just economically would be tough. This is, I mentioned, a view I really like of Chrysler. During the day, you can't really see an awful lot, but at night, you can see they had all the cars lined up. Down below, you could see they had some historical ones. The first model this, first model that, or whatever. But I think it was a really striking building, and it particularly appeals to me at night. And we all know what that is by now. Now we're going to go up. I don't know if this is a blimp shot, I believe, not the tower, but pretty interesting. Again, the amount of light you need back in the old film of that time. It's really nice that whatever it was didn't get real blurred. So, but Lakeshore Drive going along the lake there. U.S. Pavilion across the lagoon. Electric Power Pavilion. Of course, you're gonna be an electric pavilion. You light up everything in sight. And let's see what's in the next group if we have time for that. Some more of the electric lights where they all vary. This is still out there. That's the Adler Planetarium. You can go and visit it today.
Still there, right?
Yeah. You wondered, why would it take to smile? Come on, you're getting your picture taken. You're at the World's Fair. Have a good time. Smile. Some people are all real grumps. Looking out from the entrance of the World's Fair, going back along the lake shore, right off to the side was a big band shell for concerts. This is part of their midway area. This is the main entrance, and you can go to hell or heaven. What's in the great beyond? So they had all sorts of thrill rides and scare houses and different odds and ends. The Mexican Village again. Here's the ticket booth. Some of these better than others. Part of the train exhibit. Chrysler, by the way, you can tell a difference between the years because there was a big pedestrian area in 33, and in 34, let's make it even prettier and put big fountains outside. The 101 Ranch was a recreation of a Western village, another pay for admission going in, but see how life would have been out on the Old West. Ukrainian Pavilion. Well, here's one for here we go. World's Fair Greyhound. He's a guard giving directions, but you can see the Greyhound hopping over there. I never heard of these things going anywhere else after the fair ended, so I don't know what Greyhound did with them. I know that the Greyhound ones from the 3940 New York World's Fair, some of them showed up at defense plants that would take the workers from the far off parking lots into the airplane factories, but I don't know where these particular ones may have ended up.
Oh, it looks like they're on rails.
No, it's I think that's deceiving. Let me go in. No, this tires is just a walkway. If you look, this is actually behind the
There's
tram,
a shadow
and
under
there's
it.
somebody's foot on the sidewalk, so he's just in front of it.
It's
They're
deceiving, yes.
tires.
The dark line is a shadow.
Yeah, this is just a curve here.
Okay.
Okay, going the wrong way. Here we go. Okay, so what I do is I will scan these things multiple times. The scanner, if you're using a print, you can scan it with no dust removal. You can do the digital infrared one, or you can use the Nikon's own version of the scanner. So I just did this to show how two different settings can get two different results as far as what gets in here. If you look right where the mouse is, and this is one done with the digital thing. This next one's done with the Epson removal. It's taken a whole section right out where the mouse is. And that's where you have to be real careful, because sometimes for whatever reason, it says this part of this thing I'll leave here, but this one I'll just take out. And if you do like a ship, it might take out 20 portholes and leave 20 portholes. So, but sometimes it's helpful because it takes out dirt, and other times it does not. Ukraine had a very, very popular restaurant inside. Again, according to the newspapers at the time, that people really get in. And I guess goulash was the big meal they were serving. And today you think about Belgian waffles, being a big thing. Well, I guess going out to the 33, 34 World's Fair, it was the first chance people had to have goulash. And we take it for granted. Carol makes a great goulash, and I'm always asking her to make it. For people going out there, this was a real exotic foreign meal of goulash. Looking out from the fair towards the city and how to get to the Belgian village. And I guess here's another, I don't know if this is a light, a speaker, or another sewer clean out, but just a piece of grass here in this particular one. You could go out there and see the chicken farm of the future. So they had all these farms here, and we can zoom in on the slide of the sign. This way, you can see the peacocks, the wild turkeys, the bantams. It's the mammoth incubator for the poultry thing, and ask for a free guide. So in this particular one, if you were thinking about running your own chicken farm, they would sell you this whole little pre-built building with its little ventilator on top, and it would be nice and warm to keep your chickens inside. And you could go out to the fair and you could order chickens, and by the time you got home on your trip, they would be delivering them by Federal Railway Express out to your house or farm or whatever. I can only wonder what this part of the fair smelled like. So it's a good thing we don't have smell-o-vision, but we had baby incubators and we had mammoth incubators for all the birds. Ford with their garden, with their symphony orchestra. More about baby incubators with living babies. They had all sorts of different houses that were built along the thing. They were showing how they were going to build houses out of brick, houses out of glass blocks, houses with hangars built into it for the airplane. Because in the future, everybody was going to own an airplane, and you need your own hangar at home. A number of these houses were taken apart and built on the other side of the lake at it's now, I believe it's a state park, and you can go and still tour them several days a year.
What are they staring at in the ground there? Did you notice that?
No, I don't know if they're
They're
stealing
staring down at
anything
the
or
ground.
picking up a quarter they dropped. I don't know.
They're calling for chickens.
Yeah. And we could come out here to the 49er mining camp and see the way the 49ers live. Again, you know, we think about stuff like, you know, the 49ers being so long ago, the Alaskan Californian gold rush and that. Well, it was a lot closer back to the 1939 than it is to today.
It's an early version of Knott's Berry Farm.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Pan for gold. See, there was Gold Gulch there. You could pan for gold.
Yep. Here they're taking the walk into the train we've seen earlier. Now they can go see the exhibit of the mail car, that sort of thing. And for antique train nuts, I love to take some of these and try to figure out, okay, it's the whatever railroad, the 3010, what came of it, and these particular time, a lot of the trains had names. So can we make out quite this? Is the Corn King Limited? So I don't know where the Northwestern Railroad, where the Corn King Limited ran, but you know, Don Lancaster couldn't make it today. By now, he could always tell us where it went and what the food was on board. But again, I just love these old steam locomotives. Taking more tours of the Union Pacific train. This one kind of got it. The guy got the film halfway through, and we got some picture and some debris down below, very overexposed. And Standard Oil had, besides the lions we saw before, they had tigers, they had elephants, they had all sorts of things going on. There's the lions again. Are these actually maybe, are they lions or are these tigers? Let's see. They look like lions to me.
Oh my.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say it.
It's the first.
I had to get it in.
I saw, you know, I was going to say lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, lions and tigers and bears.
First show of Siegfried and Roy.
Yeah, very popular restaurant, the Rathskeller out there. And the name of the company doing Eitel, EITEL service, and they're at the Old Heidelberg Inn for Chicago World's Fair. So it's got a whole big thing of sausages or whatever out there. The Belgian Village did have some small differences between this and the 64 fair. They had more of this church scene and religious icons out there than they ended up doing in 64. In some cases, you wonder, were these molds locked and not usable, or did the fellow doing the 64 fair just decide not to put them in? One of the things that's interesting is back at this point in time, you could take your pictures and get them developed, and they would print these little icon things right on your pictures. So I have a whole variety of different ones because different companies would do it. So it looks like a commercial picture with its really nice logo down here, A Century of Progress. In some cases, they did borders that went all the way around the picture showing it. Other words, just the wording down here. But you could go off and drop your pictures off at a film lot place all around Chicago. They would say, do you want this imprinted on your pictures or not? And some people did it, and it was a nice way of giving some legitimacy to your photo. Merry England, you could go in for a giant concert there inside. Mention the Midget Village. They had the whole city there, and they made a big thing about how they had the midget mayor. They had people in midget police uniforms, you know, patrolling it and everything. So the sort of thing you wouldn't do today. This is kind of interesting. It's out over the lake, and you can see a bunch of airplanes going overhead, and the Goodyear blimp. The biggest thing they did, the American Air, well, it was the Army Air Corps at the time. They flew quite a few planes over to get people knowing where all the money was going. You see, by the way, down at the bottom, this guy had it printed on his picture. But one of the biggest thing was a Italian aviator, Bilbao, Bilbao, if I remember how it was pronounced. he flew a fleet of planes over from Italy to come over here to the fair. And it was such a big deal that they made it all the way to Italy and came over to a formation that there is a monument they put up that's still in the fair site today. Matter of fact, it's one of the very, very few pieces of the fair that's still out there. But it was a tremendous thing that Mussolini was very, very proud of, that they had done this. Now, again, we're in 1933. You know, the United States didn't get into World War II until 1941. But at this point in time, even in 33, they were having lots of problems going on in Europe and the buildup of military forces. So the people on both sides, the war, were trying to convince everybody else that their Army, Navy, Air Force was the biggest. So you don't want to take us on. And we are back into the colonial village, the Belgian village. Like I said, these hop all over the place. And they had women that would come around with trays of flowers that they would happily pin onto your lapel, and then you could get your picture taken. And they were smart. A lot of times the women had a photographer with them, and they would offer these people, "Let me take your picture, but you'd have to buy the flower to get the picture of you with a pretty girl taken by the professional photographer." And again, we can see the imprint down here. Dancers getting ready to perform in the Belgian village. Well, that's a lot of teeth. They did a big thing with China here. Again, the Chinese government sends people in, but you could also use the local Chinese population, which you come in here, and I don't know if it shows up on this group of pictures, but they brought a giant Chinese dragon in, courtesy of a local merchant. And they did a parade all throughout the fairgrounds. And like the Pied Piper, they would lead you back over to where they were charging you 25 cents to see the rest of the show. And here's somebody getting her ride in her chair, and you can see somebody else pushing another one off to the side, just out of sight. But pretty good sized crowd walking around this particular day. The garden. This is the one I did an example. Yeah, here's what I would do for the book. This was the picture as it was taken, but I didn't want to print a picture with all the water running out of the lake, so I would go and just level out the horizon, crop out. I think I used the magic brush tool to take out the words here, but just try to use a little bit of variation for the book. Just some of the. Well, this was a good one. The horticultural building mentioned earlier with the greenhouse and everything. The California wanted to put an exhibit in, but there was this big building behind it, the horticultural building. So let's put in some simulated mountains here, showing that California has the Sierras and all that sort of thing. And then out here was a water lily pond garden, and inside the California pavilion is again part of horticultural. You could see cactus and other things that were growing there. And one of the restaurants back over to one of the villages. But look at all the straw hats. And we are up in this particular one. I think this is on the top level of the observation tower. There's the Adler Planetarium. Looking out in the other direction.
I think that was the aquarium, Bill.
Is this the Shed Aquarium?
Shed Aquarium.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. The Adler has a different dome on it. Thank you.
That's a shed.
Right, thank you. It's always great when you have people from Chicago that know more about it, because I've been to Chicago maybe 30, 40 times, but I didn't live there. So nice view just looking along. Here's the common buildings mentioned, all that you could rent space in. There was a boat out here. It was supposed to be a replica of a gambling boat, and they had shows on board that.
So it was a very long and narrow fairgrounds.
Well, it was. Again, this was all 4 years ago. This was all water. They had biking boats. You could take a ride out on the boat out here and come touring along. And it was a motorized Viking boat. They were lucky because they didn't make you row it.
Did this fair make any money?
Oh yeah, no, as I mentioned, in 33, it made a lot of money. It did really, really well.
Unlike New York.
Yeah, well, what happened was the 1893 World's Fair had made money and had done well, and they came up with the idea, let's capitalize on 100 years of Chicago, and a bunch of bankers decided let's do a World's Fair, and the Chicago government said no, we don't want to do a World's Fair. They all lose money. We were lucky the last time. We're not going to do it. So these bankers started selling coupon books, and they were 25 cents a coupon. I think they were 5 for $1. And if we ever do build a World's Fair, this coupon will give you free admission to the fair. And they ask school kids to contribute money, and they put jars out at schools, and school kids would drop in a nickel to help build a World's Fair. And all of a sudden, they started getting the money. Now the politicians said, oh, wow, now it's a big thing. And of course, it became the politicians' idea. But they built this fair, and it was built by businessmen. And that's kind of what went wrong with like the 39 New York and 64 New York World's Fair. They were built by politicians. This fair was built by businessmen on a budget, and it opened on schedule, it opened on budget, it made money, and that's why they decided to bring it back for the other season. So it really stands out among other fairs that the government had very, very, very little to do with the building of this fair. It was Chicago banking industry.
Was that
Can you,
was that the planetarium
Yeah.
in the background there?
Yeah, this was
can
yeah.
you zoom in there on the agricultural building to see if we can see that thatched hut and goofy fountain?
Sorry, I got a fan going here. I didn't quite hear that, Wayne.
Can you zoom in on the agricultural building there to, that looks like the thatched hut that's near that goofy fountain.
Yeah, these are probably showing where they were growing rubber or something out here. Isn't it amazing the amount of detail you can pull out of this picture? You can actually read food and agriculture. I don't see that fountain out here in it. I'm just peering here intently. You can see some of the Greyhound buses over here. Here's another Greyhound bus over here. Now, do not see that fountain, Wayne.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's several different sized thatched buildings, but you're
Yeah.
right.
That fountain will show up in more things eventually. Let me just pan along here since I'm zoomed in anyway. One of the things that became a big thing was the end of Prohibition, right? So now we can have beer gardens and we could sell beer all over the place. So there were all sorts of restaurants done with a beer company sponsoring their particular restaurant. We'll just zip to the end here. Again, some of the parts of the Belgian village did not make it into the 64 fair for whatever reason. This is the recreation of the little boy. He's urinating at that fountain, the famous fountain in Belgium, outside the Hall of Science. By the way, I looked up the name of this restaurant, and it was copied after one in Switzerland, which is still there today. Mentioned they did exhibits out on the lagoon. So here we see a high-speed boat going by, and in the background here is a giant flying boat. I don't know who the big shot is. I got to drive through the fair. It doesn't show too well in this one. This guy's wearing kind of long shorts or something, but there's a pair of one of them, and you're wearing, oh my God, the guy's wearing, what do they call them? Jodhpurs, or I mean, some weird outfit.
Knickers.
Knickers, yeah, right. So if you need to have rocks built for your garden, we could go and you could get Mr. M.L. Towsley of Kansas City, and he's got an information table over to the left, and he will build you rocks to put out in your garden.
Wonder Rock.
A whole line of flying boats all lined up out in the lake. Again, we were trying to show everybody. This might have actually been the Italians when they came over. I'm gonna have to look into that and try to match that up. But this may be the Italian fleet that came over. Oh, mention the midget village. Here's the midget policeman. Here's another person walking through the area. But they had the whole thing out here. Again, kind of a cruel way to exploit people.
Were their buildings scaled down to their height? Or were they-
Supposedly, yes. But I say supposedly because it was scaled down to their height, and you went into the tavern restaurant, you'd be banging your head. So I think it was all done with a forced perspective sort of thing. But they did say that it was a scaled village, but you had to be able to walk into the building. So with that, I think I will stop for today. And hope you enjoyed. Like I said, despite scratches and nicks and that sort of thing, someday I'll restore these. These are all in the to-do pile, which I don't know, Carol, how many more packages did you bring in today? 4, something like that?
I don't know. The mailman just left it at the door.
Oh, okay.
But they weren't big, they were small, whatever it was.
More stuff. I'm actually trying to dial it back down, particularly on pictures. But now the thing I've been buying a lot is movies, and I've got literally crates of movies that have come in. I've got to work on. I haven't had time to do anything. We had a busy time for the holidays. Our daughter came in with our granddaughter, and we actually got to babysit, and that was great fun. We enjoyed doing that, and it was I felt like we were sitting with a time bomb the whole time. And she's a really, really great baby. She laughs all the time. She's in a great mood, but I just, oh my God, what happens if do I remember how to change a diaper? She really, we had a wonderful Thanksgiving having her visit. So unfortunately she had a cold, and now Carol has Charlene's cold. So no, maybe tomorrow I'll have Carol's cold from Charlene from whatever. But no, we had a great Thanksgiving, so it was great. And just this time of year it gets so busy with LAPD stuff. So tomorrow I'm off to run traffic control for a parade for about 6 hours, and there's always something going on. But that's why the pile gets bigger. Someday we'll get down. So let's see. Grandma and grandpa can always hand the baby back. The best part, yeah. It's actually interesting. They live up in Seattle, so we only see them periodically, but every single day they call on FaceTime, and it's really great because you see the baby and she reacts to certain things. And now that and Carol's always saying, I wonder how much she's actually reacting to us or just movement or whatever. But you can see more of her reaction now that she just spent 5 days with us. When she looks at the phone, you can see the glint of recognition. Not all the time. Sometimes she's just doing whatever babies do. But we got a real kick. She calls it every night, and we ooh and ah over her. And she loves to take the phone and put it in her mouth. So you're watching it, and the entire world is going up and down. And then she loves to hit buttons on the phone. So it would just say, they've taken a picture, or we'll turn off the camera, or you'll be in the middle of something, she'll just hang up on you. But it's scary to think that this kid is absolutely addicted to the iPhone at 9 months old. It's but yeah, we really enjoy the daily calls. So it's great fun.
Bill, just wanted to let you know I did buy into the your presentations last night and next Friday. I wasn't able to be on live last night. I watched it this morning, but I hope to be on live next Friday.
Oh, great. That's super. Yeah. I did a thing for this group called the Adventure Club, and they asked if I would do a presentation on Disney and World's Fairs. So I did an expanded version of the one I had done earlier. It's actually, when I mentioned yesterday, one of the fun things is as you keep doing things, you keep finding new things. So, we had talked about Walt going to the Expo 58 in Brussels. But then you say, oh, how about Expo 61? You go, what the hell is Expo 61? Oh, there's Turin, Italy. And they did a film for it. And you were mentioning, Don Iworks. Don went over to Italy and trained an Italian film crew in how to film Circle Vision films. and they did a whole movie of Italy for the thing. And but they changed. That's when they went from an 11 screen to a 9 screen form for circle vision. But and then they found a copy of it and rescreened it in 2021. They did a whole big retrospective of Walton, the World's Fair in Turin, and showed it. So that's kind of fun to put that stuff in.
How many folks watched your presentation last night?
I don't know. I haven't gotten the numbers from them yet.
Was it a live audience or was it all remote?
It was live, yeah. And we have Darren was there, he's waving, Beth was waving, Wayne was there. A few people were there. What was really interesting though was I have never used this particular platform before. So it was a new tool to use. And on Thursday, I did a run through with the guy, the head of the thing. And he said, okay, could you add some more pictures of the 39 San Francisco World's Fair? And I'll do all that. And I'm sure, no problem. This is going to be really fine. But I ended up having a Thursday that I wasn't expecting. I may mention on a prior thing about 6 weeks ago, I ended up going to the dentist for a routine filling, which when he's working in your mouth, you don't want to ever hear the words, uh-oh, it's like, and that became a root canal. And the root canal, unfortunately, did not go exceedingly right. And I've gone back several times to have the thing adjusted or whatever. But I went in on Thursday morning to the dentist thinking I'm going to get the final crown on. And I said to him, I don't know what it was that when he did up there, but I have this one spot on my lip here, which is feeling numb. And I always feel like I'm drooling. And I'm always touching it and it's dry, but I always feel like I'm drooling. And he goes, it's nothing I did, nothing I did. And I said, well, I don't know. It's just you were doing all this work and now I got this spot. So he brought another dentist in and he looked at all the charts and he said, oh, you might have had a TIA, which if you, I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's like a mini stroke. And then knowing my mother had those, I was like, oh God, okay. So I go home and I look up and it says a TIA. It's a minor thing, but if you have one, you have a 1 in 9 chance to have a major stroke within 2 weeks. So I said, okay, that I don't want. So I went online and like on a session like this with a doctor, they have you raise your eyebrows and smile and do all this. And she goes, I don't think you had anything, but you might as well come into the hospital to have it checked. So I went to the hospital to have it checked. And again, the same sort of thing, pull me, push me, do this, do that. I don't think you have anything, but we might as well do an MRI just to make sure. So my whole day where I had planned to finish this presentation, now I'm sitting in an MRI tube lying there going, boy, a lot of things itch when you can't reach them. So I finished the presentation, putting it together at 12:30 Thursday night, uploaded it and everything. And then I went off to do my LAPD detail, and I figured I'll have plenty of time to get home and I'll just do the talk and everything. We just get back to the station, putting the gear away, and they said, oh, there's been a major ass collision. Can you go help? And it was 3 cars in a really, really bad spot, but it was right where 2 schools were. And every person had to pick up their kids at the exact same time. So I'm out there directing traffic. You go, you stop, you go, and fire trucks, ambulances, everything. And I'm looking at my watch and go, oh God, it's getting late. Because I'm now a good hour and a half past the end of my shift. So I finally had to say, I need another unit to come and relieve me. I got to get out of here. So the other guys came. I raced home. As I'm driving home, I realized I'm still wearing my prescription sunglasses, and I've left my regular glasses in the patrol car. And there's no way to possibly go back and get them in time. But luckily, I kept my last pair of glasses, which, if you guys remember, a year or so ago, I had a fall and mashed my face on a brick wall. So I still had those glasses, but they've got these giant scratches. And then I get to the presentation, and the guy that's supposed to be the moderator doesn't show up. And I have no way of opening the room or doing anything. And they said, oh, yeah, he'll be there 20 minutes early. So I got there 30 minutes early. He's not there at 20 minutes. He's not there at 15 minutes. He's not there at 10 minutes. So I'm on the phone with the guy that runs the group, and he says, oh, yeah, you will get him. So he got there right on time, and my camera was not working right. I couldn't see what I was supposed to be seeing. So I go into this presentation and go, oh, God. So I kind of raced through it a little yesterday, and I'm going to be much calmer next Friday.
You're a real trooper to put up with this. Do you want your life history on this recording?
You know, I want people to know why I'm a wackadoodle. So, no, and on the nice side, my mouth is feeling a lot better. Oh, the really, really nice thing about going for the MRI was the doctor, she's listening and she goes, "Boy, you have the heart of an athlete." And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "A nice even pulse rate and a low heart rate. And I'm not hearing any signs of congestion in your heart or anything." And then we did the MRI. I said, "Well, how do the arteries look?" And she goes, "Far better than the average person of your age." So I'm feeling really good. You know, poor Carol, she eats a wonderful diet, and she's saying, like, you eat cupcakes all the time and donuts, and you're the healthy one. She's the one with the salad. So it's all a question of genetics. So I'm in a very good mood that everything came through, and it was great. So next week, yeah, let's see. Next Friday will be part 2 of the Adventurer Club presentation, which will
Is that presentation in front of a live audience or is it all
Yeah.
remote?
It's
is
a live audience. I can't see them though. It's a webinar as opposed to a web chat like this. So it's just me talking. And that actually threw me off a bit yesterday. I can't see anything from the audience. I have no way of judging audience reaction. You know, are people looking bored? Are they falling asleep? Or, you know, do I go faster or whatever? So it was really hard to get used to just talking. Because even if you do a live presentation, there's people out in an audience, and I can remember, you know, you give a live presentation, it's always off-putting if somebody in the first row is falling asleep, but it happens. But you know, yeah, I was down at Disney World and given this thing, and it's like all these spotlights, and there's 1,000 people in the room, and I can only see the people in the front row. And there's one lady, before I even started talking, she fell asleep, and she never woke up for the whole thing. So at least I didn't put her to sleep. But yeah, it was interesting. So next Saturday, I think I'm going to be doing more pictures of the 64 World's Fair, again from the in the pipeline stuff. Excuse me. So it's good to see you again, Dave. By the way,
Bill, I
Brock,
have a quick request.
yeah,
I assume Dave and Brock, you guys know Randy Thornton, right?
No, yeah.
yeah.
So,
the record
you know,
guy.
he's always looking for ideas, you know, for new records. And don't you think it would be awesome to have one of Space Mountain? And I just wonder if I could get you all. I wrote to him and suggested it, but I wasn't even thinking about the 50th. But that would be just a great, you know, tribute album to do Space Mountain and, you know, feature Dick Dale's music, you know, for Space Mountain and all the other soundtracks that have gone in.
Yeah,
Like,
that might be an interesting thing. And also, David, before I forget, I'm going to call you right after this to give you some information.
anyway,
It's a
like I said,
760 area code, so you'll know who's calling in.
Randy's always looking for ideas for records, and I think that would be really awesome. So
Yeah.
please, if all three of you would call in, and if other people here know Randy, please reach out to him, and I'll bet he'll do it.
Tell Randy if he ever wants to do a talk about Disney records, we'd love to have him.
I can. You know how his communication is I hear from him like once a year, and then, you know what I mean, and he's all asking all these questions, everything, and then nothing for. So he's sort of like one way. But if you write him, he'll, you know, I know he reads everything, but he's terrible at getting back to people.
Yeah, I know some people that fit that category. Before
Yeah.
we go real quick, Brock, I saw Debbie said there's still spots available at the lunch on Tuesday. I'm going to write to her and see if that's still the case. So Dave, are you going to the lunch on Tuesday? Great.
Yeah,
I would drop her a note and see if she can still fit me in. So, well, great. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And you got your dog there too, huh? It was funny when I was doing the talk yesterday. My dog, we have 2 small dogs. One of them loved to jump on my lap, and people were saying, "Oh, the dog did a cameo," and I had no idea that they could see the dog looking during the thing. But she now she's at my feet. But she loves to jump up on my lap, and she weighs about 12 pounds. And after about half an hour, I can't move my legs. So again, I'm trying to do this talk for a thing I've never done before, and all of a sudden 12 pounds jumps up and you don't even know it's coming. It just, you know, so if people saw that, they probably thought we were having an earthquake.
Well, didn't she bark during the show presentation too?
I think she
thought I
did
heard a
lunch
bark.
yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was at Saturday now instead of at Friday night.
Yeah. So, oh, and real quick, Dave, if you go to worldfairphotos.com, you can see all the books. There's 13 of them so far in World's Fairs, and I do have the Chicago World's Fair in stock.
I looked on Amazon, so it's Amazon has it. Of course, it's Arcadia that's selling it. So
yeah.
and there's hard copy as well as paperback.
Yeah, they do all the books. There's basically a deal they have with some other company where they print the pages and then they send them to some other company that binds them with a hardcover. So Arcadia doesn't do it. They have some licensee that does it. If you get it from my site, I'm also telling people I'll throw in a free CD of restored photos from the World's Fair. And if you want a book, I can tell you what, I can even bring one. If Debbie fits me in the lunch, I can bring the book to lunch and save you on the postage.
Well, good luck with that. She basically does what she wants. So,
well, she put out a call yesterday saying she needed more bodies, so I didn't have a chance to answer.
It's an amazing thing that's happening there with that group. That's a good thing.
Yeah, she keeps things really going.
Yep.
But they had a lot of last minute dropouts from it because she was over what she had for it. She had a waiting list, and now all of a sudden she's down asking for people again.
Yeah,
it had been up into the 90s, I think, or late upper 80s, and it's down to 77 people now. So it I don't know what went on, but
so for the others on this call, we're talking about a private group that is Imagineers and colleagues, former Imagineers, and it's a group that started with 4 or 5 people, Steve Miller, Debbie Delmar, and now there's 1,300 people. So it's people from Florida, Disneyland studio,
for lunch on Tuesday,
and
exclamation mark.
It's a great thing to get together with people, stay in touch with people that you worked with for many years, and so many talented, wonderful people.
This is the Christmas celebration, and then about every 2 months we have a monthly, every other month luncheon down in Burbank.
Yeah, it's fun. The last thing she did was a book signing over at the Imagineering campus, and I hadn't been back there for a number of years, and you go and meet Bob Weiss, and I was really amazed he remembered me because we had, not a lot of contact. So I hadn't seen Bob in probably 10 years. See him, talk to him, catch up on all the time. And then 2 weeks later, doing a panel discussion at the Bauer Museum, and there's Bob. It's like, I haven't seen him in 10 years, and now I see him twice in 2 weeks.
Well, for those of us that are older, in my case, I started working for Disney in 1967 as a technician, and then 30 years went by, and I had ended up working in different parts of the company, and then I worked at Universal. But now, if you're a Disney employee, it's kind of like you're always a Disney employee. It's one of those parts of your life that was amazing. But because of the people and because of the things that we were able to be part of and accomplish.
Dave, yesterday I was directing traffic. I found myself, and I'm telling people, go to the left, and I'm using 2 fingers. Because, at Disney, they always tell you not to point with one because it's offensive to some cultures and that. So I'm out directing traffic, and my partner says, why do you point like that? I don't know. It's just in my DNA.
Got it.
It's really funny how stuff just sticks with you all those years. There were a couple of times I was to give people the 1 finger, but no, I was behaving. But I'm going, go left,
Well, I really love these chats. I'm sorry I haven't been able to participate. Much like you, we have grandchildren, and family activities are at the top of things we want to do, and they often fall on a Saturday. So, but today was wonderful, as it usually is. Gosh, I can't believe that Sky Tower thing. And so you pretty much got me when you said, oh, there's a better picture in my book. So I'll have to go try to find a copy.
Yeah, Bill also has about 14 3D CDs, of pictures. And it's kind of funny. I just ran into those again yesterday and was like, oh, wow. Because you did such a great job on the CD, the, what you call them, the picture plates or whatever. And then, yeah, it's just, they're really fun.
Yeah, I enjoy them. Debbie just confirmed she fit me in for lunch, and so
Oh,
I'll
good.
see you guys on Tuesday. If you want me to bring a
See.
book, just let me know. If
I
you don't
do.
want me to bring a book, you don't. I'll feed the family somehow. I'll do it.
Oh my gosh. Happy to pay you for it, of course.
Yeah. She's just telling me to bring the money in cash or diamonds.
Yes.
Okay. I have some extra diamonds here somewhere. So.
I just wanted to mention one thing about the sky ride. My dad was 16 years old at the time of the Chicago Fair, and I remember him enthusing over the sky ride. That was his favorite part.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it was a really interesting thing. It was again, somebody had real guts to go and, he'd never built anything like it before. And imagine how desperate the fair company was to get it, that they said, well, we'll let you build this thing. But there's a question before. I really, really got the size wrong. The 13,000 something else was 427 acres. Yeah, so it was a good size, but nowhere near what I made my mistake. I was looking at a number above it and something else.
That's more like it, right?
Yeah, but you can imagine. Well, I tell you, I'm certainly not a farmer because I have no idea how big an acre is.
640 acres is a square mile.
Well, I mean, here in our how big is the Cotter Ranch? Would you say right here? We're what? No, our the plot of well, we got 25,000 acres. Is it? Oh wait, 2,500 square feet. Wondering or something like that. I don't know.
An acre is 44,000 square feet.
Yeah. Well, the house is about 4,000 square feet. So, but I know how much the land it sits on. So, well, great. I'm going to go take my blushing bride out to lunch, and I will look forward to seeing you folks. If you can join me on Friday, where I have a whole bunch more of World's Fair Disney stuff that's not been seen before, and the Circle Vision film he did for Expo 64 and some other odds and ends. So, like I said, it's kind of fun to take these presentations, and over time you find new things to add to them.
Bill,
Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
Bill. We'll see you next
I
Saturday.
just put up a link, what an acre looks like.
All right, let me see what that says.
You can click on that, and
24,000 square
it's
feet.
very interesting. It will give you a very good perspective.
What an acre looks like. How big is an acre? Okay, half acre in Chicago, half acre in Palm Beach. And what does a quarter acre look like?
Quarter acre is 11,000 square feet.
Yeah, I have. Matter of fact,
This gives you a
estimate-
visualization in something that you can really relate to as far as a house, as far as a block.
yeah. Hang on, just 1 second. What's today? Today's the 7th. Remind me
Yep,
tomorrow.
Pearl Harbor Day.
Property tax. Our property tax is due in the 10th, so I'm glad I'm thinking it will be on my property tax bill.
And most single homes are in the quarter acre lot.
Yeah. 1/10 of an acre in Baltimore. Well, okay, great. Matter of fact, I didn't go through the chat. Let me see real quick. Is there anything else that I missed that people?
Arcturus is 37 light years from Earth, by the way.
Oh, okay.
40, not 40. I saw that.
Not
Yeah.
40.
I'll round it up.
It was
Down.
probably the closest one that was a star people would know, in those
I
days.
thought it would be Alpha Centauri.
You would think, but that was probably further away, probably more than the 40. This was
That
close
was the one
enough.
they were always talking about in Lost in Space.
Yeah.
Yes, our sun is 8 minutes away.
Yeah, Scott, you asked in the chat about restoring photos. As it was mentioned on my site, there's a page on it. But if you go to the prior Zoom chats, you just search for it. I did a whole hour and a half about restoring pictures and some of the tools and things that I use. So I'll just tell you, it's a rat hole you'll go down that you can spend immense amounts of time. So like I
You
said,
get lost very easily.
yeah. Again, the thing I always have to remember on some of these pictures, I do go too wonky on them. You know, I zoom way the hell in. I'm taking out microscopic. I mean, we're talking, you know, 2 pixel wide pieces of dirt. And I'm going, why the hell am I doing this? Nobody's
Nobody
ever
would
gonna
ever
notice
see it.
whether I did it or not. Oh, there's another one I'll take off. You know, I'm just a
Because it's you. It's because
Yeah.
it's you. That's it.
We'll never
So
see
that's
it.
why some of the pictures are semi-restored, like, you know, when you get a book deadline coming up, you have to say, okay, do I take out every single piece of dirt? Or when it's gonna be reduced to this size for book, they're never gonna see it. I'll get back to it and move on.
Right.
But I tend to go back and go, oh, there's a
Mhm.
scratch in this lady's lip. How do I take it out?
That's
And
like taking
when I
all the
was working
freckles off
full
your
time,
face.
this was a safety valve. I spent all the time taking scratches off of things. I didn't think about budget schedules, layoffs, sales projections, stock prices, you know,
Also,
yeah.
Bill, TIA stands for transitory ischemic attack,
Oh, okay. It's
or
this,
what we used to call a mini stroke in the field.
yeah. Well, I was very, very glad to hear that my projection for the future is looking pretty good. So I do need to run. I got to take Carol out to lunch, and I will look forward to seeing you folks later on.
See you next week. Thanks a lot,
You
Bill.
will.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Thank
weekend.
you.
Bye.